I woke before the alarm. The house still and blue with winter light. And for a long breath, I listened for my late husband the way I used to. As if Thomas might clear his throat in the kitchen and ask how I take my tea. He has been gone for 3 years. Yet, some mornings, the air still carries his kindness. I opened the cedar wardrobe and chose the cornflower dress he once said made my eyes look young. I fastened the small pearl earrings he bought at a farmer's market in Walla Walla and touched them the way I touch a memory, to be sure it is still there. I am 67 now, old enough to know the difference between vanity and care. I brushed my silver hair until it lay smooth, then faced the mirror. You look lovely. Margaret, I told the woman who looked back. In my head, the words sounded like Thomas. Steady and warm. And for a moment, I believed he could hear me. I slipped on low heels, tucked a soft shawl into my purse, and took one last look at the framed photo of my family lined along the hallway like a promise. St. Matthew's Chapel in Spokane felt like a held note when I arrived. Warm wood and candlelight lifting toward the rafters. My granddaughter Olivia glided down the aisle like a quiet sunrise, and I felt my chest loosen with a gratitude that surprised me. For the length of the vows, I forgot the ache of missing Thomas. I squeezed my son Daniel's arm and whispered how proud I was. He smiled, handsome in his tuxedo, and for a heartbeat, I believed we were all right. The reception was at the Riverside Grand Hotel, all crystal and white linen. At the check-in table, a young attendant searched the alphabetized cards, chirped my name, and handed me a badge in a neat plastic sleeve. I glanced down, already picturing the words Margaret Lawson, grandmother of the bride. The letters were elegant, but not my name. The card read, "The old lady who pays for everything." My hand stopped in the air. Heat rose into my face, and for a foolish moment I thought perhaps there was another Margaret in the room. Another old woman with a softer heart and a thicker wallet. The attendant followed my gaze and went pale. "I am so sorry," she said. "There must be a second card." "It is fine," I heard myself say. I did not want the girl to panic. It was not her handwriting. I pinned the card to my dress and stepped into the ballroom with my smile fixed in place. Music swelled. Glass caught light like water. Twice, I felt whispers thin behind me. "Did you see her tag?" That is her. The personal ATM. When Daniel waved me over to a circle of his friends, his laugh was buoyant. Here she is, our walking wallet. Laughter broke like ice. I said nothing because my granddaughter was radiant, and because I have spent a lifetime choosing quiet. Somewhere in the corner of that glittering room, the air shifted. Shame cooled into something steadier. I did not yet have words for it, but it felt like a spine straightening after years of leaning. I lifted my chin and looked for Olivia. She deserved joy. I could give her that for tonight. The reckoning, I told myself, could wait until morning. The ballroom grew louder as the band struck up another round of jazz. I excused myself, my hands trembling, and slipped into the hallway. The gilded sconces cast long shadows, and I pressed a hand against the cool marble wall, steadying my breath. My heart was beating so hard, I thought someone might hear it through the doors. I only meant to reach the restroom, to wash the sting off my face with cold water. But fate had other plans. Inside, under the harsh light, I dabbed at my eyes with a tissue. My reflection looked both fragile and furious. That was when the door cracked open, hesitated, then closed again. A voice followed, tentative but familiar. "Mrs. Lawson, Margaret?" I turned slowly. In the hallway stood Harold Bennett, my husband's attorney and longtime confidant, dressed in his usual navy suit. His hair, silver like mine, was combed neatly back. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Forgive the intrusion. May I have a word?" I nodded, curiosity outweighing my embarrassment. He guided me toward a quiet alcove lined with potted palms. "I noticed the situation," he said carefully, glancing at the badge still pinned to my dress. His jaw tightened. Thomas would never have tolerated this. I swallowed hard. "They call it a joke." "Cruelty disguised as humor," Harold muttered. He reached into his inner pocket and withdrew a long envelope, sealed with a wax stamp I recognized from Thomas' office desk. My stomach dropped. "What is this?" "Your husband gave it to me 2 weeks before he passed," Harold explained. "He asked me not to reveal it unless the day came when it became necessary." My fingers trembled as I slid the letter free. The language was formal, lines of legal phrasing. But the meaning rang clear. Any descendant who publicly humiliated or disrespected me would forfeit their inheritance immediately. I gasped softly. "The word swimming. Thomas wrote this?" Harold nodded. "He loved you. Margaret. He feared Daniel's appetite for wealth. Vanessa's way of turning charm into demand. He wanted to shield you, but prayed you'd never need this clause." The weight of the paper pressed into my palm, heavier than gold. Why didn't he tell me? Because he wanted their respect to come from love, not fear. He trusted you would sense when the time had come. Harold's voice softened. "Margaret, that time is now." Through the doorway, I glimpsed my family laughing, glasses raised, oblivious. My son's booming voice carried, carefree, while my granddaughter danced in lace and satin. They had no idea that each careless word tonight might have already cost them millions. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into its envelope. "Not yet," I whispered. "I need to see how far they'll go." Harold studied me for a long moment, then gave a solemn nod. "Very well. But remember, Margaret, your husband left you more than memories. He left you power." For the first time that evening, I felt my shame ease. Something colder, sharper, steadier took its place. The morning after the wedding, Spokane was hushed under a pale sky. I sat at my kitchen table in my robe, the offensive name tag laid in front of me like a scar. Its calligraphy mocked me, the old lady who pays for everything. I traced the letters with my fingertip. Remembering Thomas' voice whenever someone disrespected me, never let them mistake your kindness for weakness. Margaret. I rose and went to the hallway closet, where I kept the shoeboxes of records, receipts, and bank statements. One by one, I spread them across the floor like puzzle pieces. Each canceled check told a story of small requests that had grown into bottomless demands. 3 years ago, 6 months after the funeral, Daniel and Vanessa had invited me to dinner. They poured wine and reminisced about Thomas with sentimental voices that softened me. By dessert, they mentioned their kitchen remodel. Nothing extravagant, just countertops and appliances. Vanessa had said with a practiced smile. That night, I wrote a check for $30,000. The checks multiplied after that. Tuition assistance turned into a new SUV for Olivia's 18th birthday. Summer vacations for family bonding became cruises, where I footed the entire bill. Over 3 years, the total climbed toward $300,000. My breath caught when I added it all. I had practically underwritten their lifestyle while ignoring the peeling paint in my own den. The phone startled me from the numbers. I reached for the receiver. Vanessa's voice, syrupy sweet, filled my ear. Margaret, darling, I hope you slept well. Wasn't Olivia's wedding just beautiful? Everyone said it was magical, thanks to you. Of course. I kept my tone polite. It was a lovely day. Well, she continued, hesitating just enough to feign reluctance. There's one small thing. You know Mark's parents were supposed to pay for the honeymoon, but his father's business is struggling. Poor Olivia is devastated. They had their hearts set on Bali. Daniel and I will contribute, of course. But my throat tightened. They were already circling for more. Ill. Think about it, I said, surprising us both. Silence crackled on the line. Then a too bright laugh. Of course. But you know the flights book fast. Ill let Olivia know you'll call her soon. After hanging up, I pressed my palms flat against the table. For the first time, I hadn't said yes. The word no hovered on my tongue. Unfamiliar, but powerful. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Through the glass, I saw Ethan, my grandson, tall and broad-shouldered at 22, shifting uneasily. When I opened the door, he folded me into a hug. Grandma, are you all right? I saw that name tag. It wasn't right. Tears burned my eyes. You noticed? Of course. And I overheard Dad and Mom talking last week. They think this house is too big for you. They're planning to convince you to downsize. Said they could help manage the sale and pocket the profit. The kettle shrieked behind me. I poured hot water into the teapot, my hands steady now. I looked across the table at Ethan's earnest face. I am better than fine. Sweetheart, I think I am finally seeing clearly. It's time for some changes. And, for the first time in years, I believed myself. 3 days after the wedding, my phone buzzed with a group text from Vanessa. Brunch at the Evergreen Country Club family only. 11 o'clock sharp. Wear something nice. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity tugged me out of my reluctance. I wanted to know whether the name tag had been an ugly accident or the beginning of a pattern that would strip away whatever respect remained. The Evergreen Country Club gleamed with manicured lawns and polished brass doors. Inside, sunlight poured through towering windows onto white tablecloths and silver cutlery. When I entered the private dining room, laughter rolled over me like warm champagne. My son Daniel waved from the head table. Mom, over here! His smile was broad. Too broad. Vanessa leaned in with her trademark air kiss. Margaret, you look lovely, she said, her eyes flicking over my cream pantsuit as if Shed expected something frumpier. We saved you a seat right by Mark's parents. I slid into the chair, noting it'd been placed at the edge rather than near Olivia. A server filled my glass, and conversation swirled around the room. For a while, I managed to lose myself in polite talk, but the atmosphere shifted when Vanessa clinked her spoon against her champagne flute. Friends and family, she said, her voice sweet as syrup. Thank you all for celebrating Olivia and Marcus. Wonderful wedding with us. It was truly magical. But of course, none of it would have been possible without Grandma Margaret's generosity. Dozens of eyes turned my way. I inclined my head politely, cheeks warm, and Vanessa continued, flashing her smile. We are thrilled to announce that Grandma has also decided to fund Olivia and Marcus' dream honeymoon in Bali. Applause broke out. My coffee cup hovered halfway to my lips, hand frozen. I hadn't agreed to any such thing. Olivia looked startled. Marcus stared at his plate, and Mark's parents shifted uncomfortably. I set my cup down carefully. This is the first I am hearing of it. The room hushed. Vanessa gave a brittle laugh. Oh, you said you'd think about it. We assumed that meant yes. I said, Idi, think about it. I corrected, my voice level. And I haven't decided. Daniel leaned close. His whisper meant to be heard. Mom, don't make a scene. We already told them they could book. Something inside me snapped. I straightened my shoulders. Then you told them wrong. If Olivia and Marcus want a honeymoon, perhaps they should consider one within their means. A ripple of shock passed around the table. Vanessa's face flushed crimson. Within their means? What about yours? I met her gaze evenly. My finances are not for public discussion, and neither are my choices. I stood, smoothing my jacket. Olivia, Marcus, I wish you every happiness, But I will not be pressured into funding something I never agreed to. The silence was absolute. Ethan rose beside me. "I'll walk you out, Grandma." And together, we left the room that smelled of roses and entitlement. That evening, the quiet of my house was broken by the slam of a car door. Through the window, I saw Daniel striding up the walk, his jaw tight, shoulders braced like a man heading into battle. I had barely set down my teacup when his fist pounded against the door. "Open up, Mom," he barked. I opened the door, calm as I could manage. Ethan was already in the living room, stacking dishes from the meal we had shared earlier. He froze when he saw his father storm inside without waiting for permission. "What the hell was that performance at brunch?" Daniel demanded, pacing across my rug. His voice echoed off the walls. "You humiliated us in front of everyone." I clasped my hands in front of me, keeping my voice measured. I didn't humiliate anyone. I simply told the truth. I never agreed to pay for a honeymoon in Bali. Daniel scoffed. "It's not about the money, it's about appearances. Do you understand how you made us look like beggars depending on you?" Ethan stepped forward, arms crossed. "Maybe because that's exactly what it is, Dad. You've been treating Grandma like a bank for years." Daniel spun on him, his face flushing. "Stay out of this. Ethan, you don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough." Ethan shot back. "I saw the name tag. I've heard the whispers. And I've watched you and Mom bleed her dry while pretending it's all for the family." I felt my heart pound, but for once, it wasn't with fear. It was strength. "Ethan stays," I said firmly. "This is family business, and he is family." Daniel's laugh was harsh, humorless. "Family? You're nothing without Dad's money. Mom, that's the only reason anyone even listens to you." The words cut like glass, but they no longer surprised me. I met his glare head on. Your father built that fortune with integrity, and he trusted me to protect it, not to feed your greed. For a moment, silence swelled between us. Daniel's breathing was ragged, his hands clenched at his sides. Then he jabbed a finger toward Ethan. "She's poisoning you against us. You'll regret this." "No," Ethan said, his voice steady. "What I regret is not speaking up sooner." The air in the room shifted. I felt it as surely as if the walls themselves had straightened. Something inside me hardened into resolve. "This ends tonight," I told Daniel. "From now on, I decide what I give, when I give, and to whom. And you, Daniel, you will no longer decide for me." His eyes narrowed, fury written across his face. "This isn't over," he hissed. But as he stormed out into the night, I knew one thing with certainty. For me, it had just begun. The morning after Daniel's outburst, I sat in my sunroom, the light spilling across the hardwood floor. The air smelled faintly of roses from the bush Thomas had planted years ago. For the first time in a long while, I felt calm. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered. I called Harold Bennett that afternoon. His deep voice was steady, reassuring. "Margaret, I expected to hear from you. I need to know everything," I said. "Not just the codicil, the full scope of Thomas' estate." 3 hours later, I sat in Harold's paneled office, my fingers pressed together as he laid out the details. Thomas had been more prudent than I ever realized. Investments in farmland outside Yakima, shares in timber companies, and a conservative portfolio that had doubled quietly over the years. The total left me breathless. "Thomas built this to last," Harold said gently. "And he entrusted you to manage it, not surrender it." I nodded, the weight of responsibility settling differently now, not as a burden, but as armor. Then I need to start living as he would have wanted. Not as a purse for others, but as a woman with her own purpose. That night, I opened my calendar and filled it with color. Painting classes at the Community Arts Center on Mondays. A memoir writing workshop on Thursdays. Coffee with Lydia, an old friend I'd neglected since Thomas' funeral. Each entry felt like a seed planted in fresh soil. The first time I stepped into the art studio, I felt awkward, brush in hand, surrounded by strangers who looked younger and freer. But as colors spread across canvas, I felt something inside me loosen, like a door I hadn't opened in decades. By the end of class, I caught myself smiling without effort. Meanwhile, Ethan visited often, his eyes bright with plans for his bookstore dream. One evening at my kitchen table, he spread papers across the wood, budgets, floor plans, even a sketch of the sign. The Lantern House, he said proudly. I studied the numbers. It's solid, I murmured. Then I slid a check across the table. Seed money. A loan, not a gift. I believe in this. He looked at me as though I'd given him the world. Grandma, thank you. I won't let you down. When Vanessa's calls came chirpy at first, then sharp. When I didn't respond, I let them ring out. Her texts piled up. We need to talk. You're being unfair. Richard is worried. I deleted them unread. With every silence, every unanswered demand, I felt stronger. The woman who had once written checks to keep the peace was gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone Thomas would have recognized. Winter melted into spring. Then summer. And with each passing month my boundaries held. I ignored the guilt-laden voicemails, the syrupy invitations to just talk things over. I chose instead the brush, the canvas, and the company of people who saw me as Margaret, not as a vault. By the time my 68th birthday arrived, Ethan insisted on hosting a family dinner at my house. It's time, he said, with quiet conviction. They need to remember whose home this really is. That Saturday evening, my dining room glowed with the warm light of candles. I wore a crimson dress I never would have dared 6 months earlier. My silver hair swept into a neat twist. Old friends arrived first, bringing laughter and gifts of books and flowers. Then Harold Bennett came, briefcase discreetly in hand. Finally, the knock I'd been expecting Daniel and Vanessa on the porch. Olivia and her husband Marcus behind them. Happy birthday, Mom, Daniel said, thrusting a bouquet at me. His smile was brittle. Vanessa's eyes flicked over my dress, as though evaluating its cost. At the table, conversation was strained. Olivia spoke of her new job in public relations. Marcus chimed in about their small apartment in Seattle. I listened, glad for their company, though I caught the flicker of tension in Olivia's eyes when her parents shifted in their seats. Dessert had barely been served when Daniel cleared his throat. Before we go further, there's something we need to address. A hush fell. I set down the knife poised over the birthday cake. Mom, he continued, we're concerned about your recent decisions. Funding Ethan's little bookstore. Spending time in frivolous classes. Isolating yourself from us. These are not the choices of someone thinking clearly. Vanessa leaned in. Voice honeyed but sharp. We love you, Margaret. That's why we believe it's time to consider giving Daniel power of attorney for your own protection. A stunned silence blanketed the table. Ethan's jaw tightened, but I lifted a hand to stop him. My voice was calm, steady. So you want to strip me of my choices because they don't serve your comfort? Mom, be reasonable, Daniel said. Dad left you more than enough. You've always relied on me to guide things. I leaned back, feeling the weight of Thomas' codicil in my mind. I relied on you because I believed you respected me. But tonight proves I was wrong. Harold set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. That is a serious claim you've made. Daniel, do you have evidence of incompetence? Daniel gestured wildly. She's throwing money away on a bookstore in the digital age. She refuses sensible downsizing. She's ruining everything Dad built. That's enough. Harold interrupted, his voice cutting like steel. He reached into his briefcase and produced the envelope Thomas had entrusted to him. Your father anticipated this very situation. The room froze. Olivia's fork clattered to her plate. This codicil, Harold said, sliding the envelope toward me, states that any descendant who humiliates Margaret, attempts to control her finances, or tries to force her from her home forfeits their inheritance. And Daniel, your behavior tonight, coupled with the name tag incident and the brunch, more than qualifies. The blood drained from Vanessa's face. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came. I looked around the table at Olivia's shocked eyes, at Ethan's steady gaze, at Harold's unwavering expression. My hands did not tremble as they once would have. Yes, I said clearly. I want the codicil enforced. And in that moment, the power shifted forever. A year can change the landscape of a life more than a decade of quiet endurance. 12 months after that fateful birthday dinner, I stood in the doorway of the Lantern House. The bookstore Ethan had dreamed into being. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall front windows of the restored Victorian building, catching on rows of polished shelves and the scent of fresh coffee drifting from the small counter at the back. The walls glowed with murals. I had painted myself, forests filled with hidden birds, rivers winding like stories waiting to be told. Children's laughter floated from the corner where Ethan's girlfriend Emma led a Saturday story circle. A small chalkboard announced the week's events: poetry readings, writing workshops, literacy tutoring for adults. The place was alive, not just with books, but with possibility. Grandma! Olivia's voice drew me back. She stepped through the doorway, cheeks flushed from the autumn air, a stroller rolling in front of her. Inside lay a sleeping infant, her daughter. When Olivia lifted the blanket, I saw the tiny face and the soft tuft of hair. Meet Clara, she whispered. Tears pricked my eyes. Named after? After you, Olivia said, her voice trembling. Not your name, but your strength. Marcus and I wanted her to grow up knowing what it means to stand tall. She reached for my hand, and in that gesture, I felt the thread of reconciliation pulled taut. Over the past year, Olivia had visited often, sometimes alone, sometimes with Marcus. She had apologized for her silence during the cruel jokes and humiliations. Unlike her parents, she chose reflection over denial. Slowly, we had rebuilt something real between us. Ethan emerged from the back with a stack of new arrivals. His face lit up when he saw us. Perfect timing. Grandma, I want you to see the numbers. He set a binder on the counter. Flipping to charts marked in neat ink, we're already profitable. We can expand the community program next spring. Pride swelled in me like a tide. Your grandfather would be proud. So am I. Outside, leaves skittered along the sidewalk. Inside, warmth wrapped around us like a promise. I thought briefly of Daniel and Vanessa. After the codicil had been enforced, they'd tried to contest it, but the law was ironclad. Within months, they had moved to Arizona, chasing a business scheme that failed almost immediately. The updates came only in fragments through Olivia resentful phone calls, bitter complaints about what they had lost. But I no longer carried their anger as my own. It was theirs to keep. As Ethan spoke excitedly with Olivia about new programs, I stepped aside, watching the light fall across the mural. This place was more than a bookstore. It was proof that respect and love could grow from ruins. It was a second chance for them, and for me. When baby Clara stirred and opened her eyes, I leaned down, whispering so softly only she could hear. This is where the real story begins. When I look back, I realize the greatest change wasn't in my son or daughter-in-law, it was in me. For years, I confused keeping peace with giving in, telling myself that silence was love. But love without respect is only servitude. The moment I finally said no, the weight I had carried began to lift. Thomas left me a codicil to protect me, but what truly saved me was learning to protect myself, rebuilding my life through art, through Ethan's bookstore, and through genuine family ties reminded me that dignity is not a gift others can give or take. It is a choice I make every day. If you find yourself diminished in your own home, know this: it is never too late to draw a line, stand tall, and begin again. What about you? What lesson did you take from my story? And from which city are you watching?